Hi there, welcome. Andrea Waddell here. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about, get ready, color theory, but we're gonna make it simple and I'm gonna just focus on what I focus on most when I'm painting, which is complementing colors, what to do with them, how to play with them, and saturated colors versus desaturated colors, adding whites, kind of toning down the intensity of a color and playing around with that. So what I've tried to do here is use you as a guinea pig as I'm creating this online course, self-paced online course, and trying to talk about color in a way that doesn't, tense up your brain. I don't know about you, but when I look at long videos about color theory or read about it, it takes kind of the fun out of the equation. So we want to try to keep things fun, spontaneous, and intuitive, but we do want to learn a couple of things so that you can problem solve faster if you get to a place in your painting where things aren't working and it kind of looks like it might be a color issue. That's my goal. I hope you get something from watching this video. You know the drill. If you like it, give it a like. If you haven't already subscribed here, do that. And if you haven't subscribed yet to my newsletter, go ahead and do that. That way you will be the first to know when I've got classes coming up, but especially the online class that I'm hoping to launch whenever I finish this thing. So you want to go over to andreawaddell.com/subscribe and let's get to it. So all of the colors that I'm going to use through this whole demonstration is just with these three primaries. So that's our primary yellow, primary blue, cyan, our primary red, magenta. And those are the three. Those are our mother colors. Let's call them that. I'm going to put them down there quickly. There's our yellow, our blue, our red. And these are the colors. You don't mix anything to get these colors. They are the primaries. Now, let's mix up our secondaries. So that's our yellow and our red. It's going to give us our orange. And we're going to do our red and our blue. That's going to give us our violet. And there we go. Our blue and our yellow, we're going to get our green. So far, so good. These are our complementary colors. So we have the yellow and we have the violet. We have a little combination of the blue and the orange, and we have the red and the green. Those are our complementary colors. And I'm going to talk for a minute about all the things that we can do with complementary colors, but here they are. Here's our groupings over here. Next, and kind of fun, but the tertiary colors mix a secondary with a primary. So that's why we have a yellowy orange here, more or less yellow. We get a yellowy green right there. And better. We have our yellowy green. That's better. And then we have our reddish violet. Red violet sits over there. And then you've probably guessed, then we have our blue violet over here. So we're adding some blue to our violet mixture. And we're just pushing the bar. This isn't my favorite way to mix a violet, using a cyan blue and a magenta red. I really like using cobalt blues to make my violets, but I got more blue. Blue violet. Kind of hard to see, but anyway, you get my point. All right, there's that one, and which one have I forgotten? Ah, and we have our reddish orange. So that, and the reason I wanted to talk about this today is that these are also complementary colors. That you have your, and they're beautiful. They work so wonderfully well together. You have your yellowy orange and your bluey violet can make a lovely combination. What that might look like. I mean, this is the wheel that I've made with the primaries, but that can be any assortment of these kinds of, you know, we could argue that these are bluey violets, and these are yellowy oranges, and this makes for some interesting ways to play with complement. You know, there's a whole variety of ways to think about tertiary colors and how they can work together, but essentially yellowy orange and bluey violet are complements, and our reddish violet, yellowy green, reddish violet. And again, lots of ways to think about that. Here's, let's call these yellowy greens. They look yellowy green because again, everything's super relative, but next, you know, paired up like this, they all look yellowy green. And let's just call these reddish violets. This one looks super blue in this grouping. And watch what I mean by colors being super relative. If I take this one, and it looks pretty blue in that pair, you just saw that? Looks kind of, you know, like it's straining towards a blue. But if I put it next to this other group, it really looks red. Redder. And this whole thing about seeing the nuances of temperature differences, you know, takes some practice. That's where the eye practice comes in. There you go. You only have a little spot because I forgot you. Because you're not my favorite. Okay, you can see why I'm not really good at, you know, the sciencey, super structured approach to this. Okay, so we have our reddish orange and our bluey green, and we can, again, we can see how that, you know, can play out in a variety of ways. You can play with these sort of endlessly, is learning to see these pairs when they're put together, how they play out. And these are going to be, you know, interesting. They look kind of beautiful together, doesn't it? It looks, that would be lovely. That would be a beautiful palette to have this, you know, would be your dominant, maybe this bluey green here, and this is an accent. What happens, a mistake with complementing colors is using half of one and half of the other. You can kind of see that, how they kind of cancel each other out. So, you know, you would want to have one main area of one or some analogous colors, like a grouping here. Analogous colors are 3 of these. Let's not confuse ourselves. But anyway, you could have a grouping of similar colors here, and this could just be the accent to play with. So far, so good. I tried that, but with more orange and less blue in the one lower left right here. And if it's helpful to you to just put these combinations somewhere when you're working, it just acts as a great little reminder. All right, so let's talk about this for a second. What to do with your complementary colors, and why, you know, why bother thinking about them? Let's talk for this is an art card, and I put down some. It's a reddish violet, so I guess I'm going to play with a tertiary. The complement of red violet is, see, I don't even remember sometimes. a yellowy green. They probably have so if I put this down like this, it's hard to show you when I'm holding this. This yellow can either neutralize my color, darken it, neutralize it. That's what would happen if you put a glaze on top of it. Or if I use this yellow in more opaque way, and I let some of that purple pop through, it's going to make my yellow look more vibrant and give it more depth. That's the word I'm looking for. Something else about complements and ways to work with them is that if you use, let's say, a green, and instead of adding a black to make it darker, to tone it down, you add a little bit of its complement. So let's say I add a little bit of this red to this green to varying degrees. It's going to tone down the color, and it makes really beautiful. I mean, to the extent that you want it to be toned down. It desaturates it. And that's true across all of them. So using complementary colors on top of each other is a way to calm a color down, tone a color down, and it works both ways. So if I decide I want to put a shadow, I've got something red, and I want to put a little shadow under it, instead of coming in with a black, let's say I was going to come in with a black. Let's try it just for fun. Let's say I've got a little black here. I'm using these really cheap brushes. It's not my favorite, chip brushes. But, okay, let's say I decided to tone this down with a little bit of black. It's a different color than if I tone it down instead with its complement. Which is green. I prefer this one over here a lot. Let's talk about orange. And we have orange, and that's just our pure orange. And we want to desaturate it, or add, or subtract to the pureness of its color is what that means. So one way to do that is with adding some white. Little by little, if we add some white to it, we're going to desaturate it. I'm guilty of using a lot of white, too much white. That's one way to desaturate with. You can desaturate with a little bit of gray, which is just black and white mixed. I don't usually do this, but you can get really great colors. I mean, it can be very, very beautiful. That's a little heavy-handed there, but the purity, the pure orange loses its intensity. Should we choose, we could add a black to it, to our mix. Black and our red and our orange. And we could desaturate it this way. So it's bringing in, various degrees of nuance, and it's important, or it's interesting, or it's helpful in your art to have these muted colors around an area that's super saturated is always really, really beautiful. Let me show you an example. I mean, not to say that, you know, my work is the example, but if I use this as an example, and this, you know, wasn't planned, this is playing, this is a little abstracted landscape that I like a lot that I'm going to use for a bigger painting. But the fact that this yellow is so vibrant next to something that is, you know, its complement, but a desaturated version of that complement is what makes that area pop so much. So that's something to play with. So my favorite way to desaturate is using the complement. So here we were just kind of adding whites, and that can go whiter and lighter and lighter and lighter. And this was adding gray and a little bit of black, not much, and that can go darker and darker. And let's just add the complement. So let's add a little blue to that. A bit of blue, and start to desaturate this. It's gonna look green. I can take down and tone that color down and get, you know, beautiful colors, interesting colors, colors that are in harmony with each other. The other thing to know about complementary colors is that when you mix any two complements, you're going to get a gray after a while. It might not come out gray out of the gate, but if I take and I'm just, for this demonstration, I'm using all primary colors. I haven't added anything, even though it's been really hard, to my palette. So if I take a red, and I add its complement, a green, after a while, and I'm mixing this directly, but after a while, it's going to start to move into a gray, and the way to see that is to add some white so that you can see this is starting to become a gray. And that's going to happen with every single complement. But what's really beautiful about that is, so if you've made a gray with two complementary colors like that, and you kind of play with that, well, this is a very red leaning gray, but if you play with that, it's going to harmonize and look pretty beautiful. You know, and you can add more white to that, change that. You know, to add a neutral. But let's say you've mixed half and half, a combination of our green, our red, and it's really super, it's a warm gray. To cool it down, you can add a blue. You can add a little blue to it, or you can add more green. But if we add blue, this is going to cool this down a lot. You see that? And you add that. Maybe you add the blue to a place where you've got some yellowy orange. You've got some yellowy orange going on over here. And you've got a bluey. Okay, that's not mixing very well for me, but anyway. And we take this, it's going to be a play on a complement, or on a tertiary, or what have you. And you can see if I surround it, that color starts to vibrate in a really cool way. Let me show you a couple of examples now. If I'm looking at this beautiful Bonnat painting, Pierre Bonnat, and I look at this, I can see this is a lot of playing with complements. We've got our reddish violet, and that's next to our orange, so there's a play of complements there. And then we've got our yellow, that's a complement, and it's sitting underneath the violet. We haven't talked about that yet. And you know, as you come across, you could just start to see how has he played with complementary colors. And it is it's fun to just look at some of this work and see, well, if I see yellow here, a big patch of yellow, I know I'm going to find a violet somewhere. If I see this beautiful blue here, I bet this is going to be a red kind of orange somewhere. I'm going to find some orange somewhere. This is what I was trying to say. If I have a green and I look somewhere, oh, there is a little bit of red. And they're all speaking to each other. And the things change and shift depending on what's sitting next to them, which is the most important piece of information, you know, of all, is that it's about continuing to play and make it fun for yourself, and also to know that you're calling and you're responding to something. There's no formula. When I was playing around with this little sketch again, I wasn't planning, okay, now I'm gonna do a cool thing because I've got a yellow thing here, a cool and a neutral. It is instinctive, but what I found is helpful is that when I'm looking at it afterwards, I can say, oh yes, that works sort of magically and I can say why it works. And so that integrates things, and then it's something you can bring in to your next paintings. I hope that's helpful. And this, of course, all of this applies to glazing and cold wax, and I'll talk about that in the next color sequence when I talk about color next. Okay,